Audio goes. You ready? All right, go. I always love doing this. I don't know why, but I love it. Good evening, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the March 22, 2026 meeting of the Millburn Township Charter Study Commission, which is called to order. In accordance with the Open Public Meeting Act, be advised that the notice of this meeting was posted on the township website. Commissioner Billy, will you please have everyone stand for the pledge of allegiance? The pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, I will now have a roll call. Dr. Khan?
Mr. Miller,
Present.
Dr. Thomas Skinner, Ms. Parker Lentz,
Present.
Mr. Kenna,
Here.
Mr. Gardner.
Here.
I note that we also have Council Suzanne Tarasco of King American Collins in attendance.
The record will show that we have a quorum for this meeting. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Second.
Beautiful. All in favor?
Aye.
Beautiful. Are there any commissioners with reports since our last meeting?
Since our last meeting was like 48 hours ago.
That's true. All right.
Less than
We
48
had a nice
hours.
rummage sale intake day.
That's,
That was it.
that's,
If anyone has anything to donate, we're collecting.
that's true. We will talk about the rummage sale at the appropriate time, Commissioner Parker Lentz. All right, let's do the public comment. Public comment, to speak during the public comment period, please follow these instructions. Ensure your Zoom display name shows for your first and last name. Click the raise hand button. You will be called upon in order and promoted to the panelist. Please turn on your video when called to speak. Clearly state your full name and whether you are a resident or a business owner. To facilitate an orderly meeting and permit all to be heard, please limit your comments to 3 minutes. As commissioner, I'm going to nix that today because I want to have a discussion, okay? So,
I think to set the record straight, we had this meeting so that we can get as much community input as possible. So we might not respond immediately because that'll take a lot of time. We might respond afterwards, but whatever you have to say, let's get it out and let's.
thank you. A reminder that the public comment period is an opportunity for residents to share their views with the commission. Commissioners will not respond to the questions or engage in dialogue during the public speaking time. We'll carefully consider all comments, and at the end of the public comment period, questions and discussions may be addressed at the chair's discretion, which we will have. The chair will have the dialogue. So, let's have a public.
Sure.
Discourse.
What?
Discourse.
Discourse. Does anyone have a question, a comment for us, how we have been performing our commission duties and what we have done so far? Does anyone have any comments for us?
You've been doing an excellent job.
Oh, Jeff, be quiet.
I gave you a triple star.
Motion to close the meeting.
I've never heard that from you.
Ben?
But if you've been coming to the meetings, you would have heard this. You've been doing an excellent job. Please watch the videos of the
Yes.
interviews. That's the educational value, especially like in the last 4, where you interviewed the mayor of Verona. I think Thursday, you interviewed the business manager, not a business administrator.
Township manager.
Township administrator, I think Rockaway or.
Randolph.
Randolph, the councilman from Red Bank. Just to get the input, because I think there is a consensus, there's a 5 factor, because they're doing a great job. Just that we have to get the public to watch the video. Those are the
Correct.
educational value.
And Ben, good to see you as opposed to be on Zoom.
This is my 3rd time to your town.
Yeah.
No, Zoom was the first time.
Yeah.
Oh, Chris, he was here.
I just thought, I thank you for letting me know about this meeting, and I'm a former charter study member in Red Bank, New Jersey. Now, your circumstances here are different, so I don't want to comment on whether you should change your government or whatever. I mean, I'm just gonna, when they interviewed me, it was, from our experience and how things have turned out. So if you want to talk to me after the meeting, I'll hang out. I got elected like they did. I'm currently serving on the Red Bank Borough Council. Our charter commission did recommend a government change. We went from a partisan council format, weak mayor to manager format. I know that you're considering all your options. The 2 finalists in our process were the strong mayor option and the council manager option, which is more like a board of directors. Kind of like, I use the analogy, like similar to a board of education, or your council members are board members. But anyway, it was an experience to go through it, and I thought I'd just be here if anybody had any questions from the point of view of what happened in Red Bank. I think it was 3 years ago that we did all this. And I just got elected to a second term, so I think we're doing okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ben. Does anyone else, should I give a little synopsis of how many folks we have interviewed and who we have interviewed and so these folks? So far, everyone, we have interviewed, everyone in, municipal buildings. We have, no, not everyone, but the head, the department heads and rank and file. We've interviewed, the police chief, the battalion chief, the head of the DPW, and
His direct.
the rec department. And we've also interviewed like the rank and file of those respective departments. And just so everyone knows, we are really blessed to have such dedicated people in this township. And when you interview like the chief of police, the fire, the DPW, the rec, people love coming to work here, you know, and we have a very, very loyal contingent. So that is good. And then Commissioner Biller and Commissioner Tanner, they interviewed other townships similar to our size. So Corey and Chinook.
Interviewed the mayor of Madison, who incidentally is the longest serving such official in the state, I heard. Yes.
Yeah.
And then we interviewed Nancy separately from the interview we had on Zoom also.
Yeah, it's very informative to get their perspective on elected mayor versus not elected mayor, how it goes for their town. We specifically chose towns based on their size and their similarity in having a downtown and, you know, commutable to the city, things like that, just to get a different perspective. Because, you know, we know what we know from our town, but it's good to be informed about what works and what works from other towns that are in similar situations. So that all of this is the intent to inform ultimately our decision and our report when we put that together.
Can I add a comment?
Yeah, Commissioner Parkland and Dr. Khan, you folks interviewed our business administrator 3 times in at least 10 hours, right?
And in addition to that, he was kind enough to lend his time for us to speak with other business administrators from other townships. So that we were very cognizant of the fact that we don't know what we don't know. And we don't want to pretend that we know something because we are, you know, we haven't served on the TC, we haven't been a municipal employee. We've been loyal township residents for a variety of years, but, you know, at this board, I think or commission, we've been here for a collective, you know, probably close to 100 years.
Well, I've been here
All right.
45.
95 for him and.
I'm almost 30, so I mean,
So there you go.
collectively, I feel like we almost span 100 years, you know, or collectively. So we just don't want to mess up what we have, and we know we have a good thing within a municipal building. We love our employees, they love us, they love our town, and we don't want our business administrator to be hindered by changes that we potentially make. So we want to make sure that we also interview business administrators or other equal, you know, titles in other townships with the variety of governments that we're considering, so that the business administrator has a chance to ask his questions and pose his reservations. Because when we initially interviewed him, you know, that was the crux of like, okay, well, this is what he thinks works and doesn't work. How do we ask the other folks, you know, to opine? And he had a good chance to chat with several of them, and we feel comfortable that he feels comfortable. And we've changed our minds multiple times after each interview, because it's like, wow, that's a question. So now it's just trying to synthesize with him again, because I think we have another opportunity to speak to him to say, okay, now that you've thought about all these different forms, what do you think are the problems? You know, and I think that's, I'm gonna reserve my right.
The other thing, to the extent it's not clear, is this panel also spoke with current and former TC members from, you know, obviously current now, but from,
1991.
yeah,
91
Mhm.
until now.
yeah,
Till now.
so decades past, and the point is to get an opinion and insight from every angle. And that's why today, to bring this full circle is critical, is now we have the community in front of us. Like, we've had open meetings, we've had at least 10 or so since January or so. We have it every week, but you know, we've had some attendance online and in person, but this is definitely by far the most audience members we've had. And so we're very excited to hear from you today, because the residents are obviously a critical component of our decision making.
And, thank you. Dr. Khan, you and I went to Verona.
Yes.
Can you, elaborate on that?
Yes,
How many hours we spent there?
So, but before I get to the Verona story, I
Okay.
just wanted to review all of the TC members, past and present, that we've interviewed. So we've spoken to 16 individuals. I believe 4 of those individuals we've spoken to both privately and publicly. Out of those 16, exactly half were Democrats, half were Republicans. They represent a total of 76 years of experience governing our town. And they span, I believe, almost every single year from 1991 to present. So we tried to make sure we got as many perspectives over as many different time periods as possible, over as many different configurations of Republicans and Democrats as possible, just to cover all of our bases. And as for Verona, when we found out that the mayor of Verona was able to come speak to us, we actually wanted to dig up their charter study. So they had done their charter study in 1986. And we were curious as to what drove that change, what considerations they were looking into when they made the change. I believe they had gone from a borough council form of government, which was partisan, to a council manager form, which they chose at the time to make nonpartisan. So we couldn't actually dig up the report when Chris and I went to Verona.
We spent 4 hours.
So what we did was,
And Christine Gotti's counterpart, you know, their township clerk, she was very nice. So then we went to the library.
yeah, so we went to the clerk and she said, well, actually, this is something that we've been looking for, but we can't find. So then they said, well, first we went to the library saying, do you have this on file? They said, go talk to the clerk, which thankfully was next door. So we went to the clerk and she said, yeah, we've been looking into it. And she actually had the box on her desk. She's like, we've actually been looking for it recently and we can't find it.
Right.
She's like, go back to the library. So we went and dug through the newspapers, which thankfully are digitized, but unfortunately are not online. So you have to use like the physical computer in their library. It wasn't microfiche. I did sort of want microfiche because that would have brought me back to.
And this
college.
guy is an uphill.
Oh my God.
So thankfully the Verona Cedar Grove Times at the time, they had their local newspaper, like our item. They actually published the entire report in installments. And so we ended up transcribing it as a commission. It's on our website. There's some very interesting insights in their charter study. You know, I encourage everyone to read it. It was very informative, just setting a baseline before we spoke with the mayor of Verona and how their system is currently working.
Right.
And he is also one of the interviewees, so that's a really great interview to watch.
It was
Right.
recorded, I think, I'm gonna get the date wrong if I try to do it.
No, that's-
March 4th, maybe.
That's right. And it seems like Verona has a very, very, they're very communicative with their township residents. And that's something that we as a commission, Joanna Parker Lenz is working on, you know. Our website, our township website is cumbersome at best, you know, so we will.
We've been making comments, but
Yeah,
people are listening actively. It's not the role of our commission to
No, right,
change things, but when we study this in such a, you know, in depth, we have the ability to make recommendations to them personally and professionally and make comments. And the nice thing about our town clerk and our business administrator, and I'm sure our soon to be, you know, whoever's our assistant, right, that's just starting, will become part of this, you know, picture of people we can consult with, and Christine Gotti, who's awesome. So when we do actually make these recommendations, while they may not be official and people don't have to adhere, they really are willing and want to get opinions from those of us who've been studying and speaking to other townships, and they really want to learn, which is why Alex was so amenable to speaking with the other heads of their towns as from an administrator perspective. So
there could be formal recommendations that this charter commission makes that gets voted on by the public, and if passed, formal changes could be made, but at the same time, there will be informal suggestions in the report that may be taken up by the township regardless of whether formal changes are made.
Right, it's interesting to learn other perspectives.
All right,
Let me give you a question.
all right.
Eric Osserman, Milburn resident, almost as long as Commissioner Drucker, although I failed the test by 12 years. Given the great number of people that you've spoken to thus far, has anyone argued in favor of keeping our system of government partisan? And what is their argument and where are they wrong?
Okay, so on Thursday, on
I
Thursday,
have to leave the witness.
on Thursday, we're gonna start phase 3. And phase 3 will entail whether we should have partisan elections as we have now, nonpartisan elections. Should we have the township committee have 5 people, 7 people, 9 people? Of 43% of the people in Milburn Township are registered as independents. So that's taking into consideration. Does everyone here?
Strong mayor, weak mayor, we're
Yeah,
considering.
yeah, well, that's, yeah, yes.
Right, yeah.
Tell everyone what a weak mayor and a strong mayor is.
Yeah,
So-
so there's couple forms of government that we can go to. One's called mayor council, one's called council manager.
Which, by the way, we did actually have our external law firm that we retained did a presentation on this
Watch
a
that.
few
Which
weeks
is-
ago.
Yeah,
Which
watch
is a
that.
very,
Very
very
informative.
good, simplistic breakdown of the different options and quite frankly,
slides.
what's not available to us. Because ultimately, there aren't actually that many options that are ultimately available to us. And so he broke it down with slides. So I encourage you all to go back and we'll research what date it is in our next meeting. We'll announce, like, remind everyone what it is, but it's informative. But sorry, Jerry.
Yeah, that reminds me that I should probably defer to council because they'll do a better job of explaining weak mayor, strong mayor than I will. I guess just very simplistically, mayor council, you have a directly elected mayor and a separate council. The council serves essentially a legislative function and the mayor serves an executive function. For council manager, you would have the governing body is an elected legislative branch. And they appoint a manager who serves as the executive. So in the council manager form, in the mayor council form, the mayor is always directly elected. In the council manager form, the mayor can either be directly elected by the residents or selected from within the council itself. And, in that case, the mayor just serves as the first among equals. They chair the council. They don't have any executive function.
And only one
Right,
one form can be partisan versus nonpartisan.
Both of them can be
Both
both
of those,
partisan
okay.
and nonpartisan
So
elections.
The public
yes.
can understand.
Yes.
And leading back to the partisan, nonpartisan, who recommended, there were people who served formerly or are serving currently recommended not changing from partisan to nonpartisan, for reasons that they felt strongly about, that it shows someone's, background, perspective, true colors, so to speak. So there was an argument for that, and other residents who we spoke with offline, just residents who were saying they were worried that if you don't have an R or a D attached to somebody, people will have to dig deeper and learn about the candidates more. They may not want to, and they might choose to just go down a line because it's important to them. And look, it's a valid point for some people. That's if they really feel like that's who they want to align with. I don't want to discount those folks who feel that way. Not everyone feels they want to spend the time or have the time to research super local government because to them, issues of garbage, snow, parks, rec, things that we deal with, police, fire on a daily basis, they're like, meh, it doesn't really matter, but I do care about, how they align. So look, everyone has an opinion. I mean, we have to manage how people feel in our town. And it's more about, okay, is there an overwhelming majority of who feels which way or another? I don't know if we'll feel that way because nobody ever on a local level comes out to the degree to give us a majority or not majority. We have to really think what we don't know, worry about, what the future generations will be affected by. And we can only do that by doing the research from the outside towns from the outside municipal workers that we've interviewed, and hopefully our, recommendations among each other and from folks who show up.
Well, I think that recenters today's meeting is, we're not here today to make decisions or give an opinion as to where we think we might be based on prior research. Today's point is to get everyone's opinion. Everyone's opinion has valid rationale, and that's what we want. We want as much information thrown at us so that when we start to actually discuss and debate, we have every perspective on the
Fight
table.
This
properly.
is more like a listening session, so why don't we flip the question?
Yeah.
Right, well, just let me have, just let me say this and then,
Feel free to press this, lead a little, like,
Yeah.
just as long as you don't disturb.
go. Myself and Dr. Khan, we interview, and then Joanna, I think you interviewed that, okay? We had a very, very strong township committee person who was a big Republican. And we also had a big, strong Democrat, okay? And they were on the township committee together. So when it came time to make decisions, they both, they argued, in the back room and whatnot, but net, at the end of the day, they said, what is good for Milburn Township? And that's what we should have, so, and unfortunately, this isn't the 90s, and people,
Have a lot more information at their fingertips.
people have a lot more information, and you're right, and people are skewed for, what's going on nationally and everything like that.
Scar
And,
tissue, a lot of scar tissue.
yeah, and we cannot have that here in Milburn Township. So that's where we are coming from and everything. So as Commissioner Parker Lynn said, my mind, I flipped about 3 times how I'm thinking and everything,
But I think there's consensus on the first issue was whether we convert to the Faulkner Act. I think everyone that you've been interviewing.
Those who we've
That's the
interviewed.
first, the first issue is, do we stay in the form of government, not subject to the Faulkner Act, to the Faulkner Act? And I think based on all the interviews and, the idea is convert to the Faulkner Act. Partly because it sets out what the role of our business manager is, because right now our business administrator is governed by an ordinance. I think there's consensus on that, and I think the consensus from the various interviews is that we don't have elections every year, that we go into a 2-year cycle. This is what I've been
And
hearing.
that's a consensus from municipal,
Yeah, about
folks as
whatever
well.
we do,
It's
the recommendation that we'll be on a 2-year cycle for elections and go to the Faulkner Act. And then the other issues are just, we have to fight about the size of the.
I've studied the Faulkner Act, like, I
Let's,
think I say it verbatim.
Let's stay on the topic because he brought up partisan versus non-partisan.
Okay.
So I just wanna hear from the public what the views are. Are you done on that topic? Do you have more to talk about? Or there's
No,
other hands up
I-
there, so.
My view, I'll just share my view, that I think it's toxic to enter party politics into our town. My view is, and I think it's well demonstrated, that if we had had a nonpartisan township committee back in 2011 and 2021 and 22, you wouldn't have the ugly elephant structures that have been built throughout town. You would have had a much more intelligent discussion over how to meet our affordable housing obligations. Instead, we had those structures built without any resident input, only because the entire party was aligned one way. And I would say to residents who want a partisan system of government, great. Why don't you go and build more of those structures and try to
Fair
get
enough,
through
we have
town?
somebody else up there.
Yeah,
Well, I'll start with, I don't agree with what he said, but anyhow,
you wanna
I
state your
wanna
name?
talk-
If we can
Jean
just-
Cosgrove.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
wanna talk about something more basic than that. Not whether it's parties or no parties, and my understanding of the roles of what government we choose, currently now we have a mayor, but really this is my interpretation. The business administrator is running the show, like he's the one, the day-to-day paid person. So how does this change? You know, regardless of party politics, how does it change in the role of the mayor now in terms of strength? Does he become the business administrator? Do you keep a business administrator? That's more my concerns is how our government functions, not political parties, which I think actually, in my opinion, we should keep and not keep shifting the blame back and forth and making, you know, for political reasons. I more want to know how it's going to work with each form of government you're describing.
Wait a second.
No, 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 hold on, wait,
No,
I am entitled to my. Sorry,
We're not gonna
thank you.
do, we're not gonna do the.
You guys aren't gonna
engage-
chat. We'll
Engage
chat
with
with
us,
you.
please.
Yeah. So your concern is basically with the strong mayor versus a weak mayor.
And what happens to the business administrator? Is he
So-
still there? Is there
Yeah.
a different name? What's going on?
So the strong mayor option is something that has not been recommended. Kind of almost overall, the weak mayor is the form of government, which is what we have currently. We have a weak mayor. Whether they're directly affected,
Weak is
sorry,
a legal
elected.
term, by the way,
Weak.
not like a judge.
Yes, it's not a
Okay.
judgment. It's not a
I just
judgment.
need a definition of weak
So
mayor
why
and
don't
strong
you
mayor.
do, as another.
Yeah, so-
Why don't we ask Susan to give us
You-
a
okay,
scenario?
Suzanne, you want to give a?
Sure, so the difference is with regard to the mayor's role and the role that the mayor plays in the township. A strong mayor is directly elected by the people, and functions as the chief executive of the town. So many of the things that the business administrator does now, a strong mayor would be in charge of. The strong mayor, it's a chain of command that works its way upward. And the strong mayor holds all of those functions and is in charge of all of the different departments that fall under him. In a weak mayor, the catchphrase is first amongst equals. The weak mayor sits on the township council. He or she has the same vote as everyone else, and they are more of a ceremonial figurehead with certain duties that are afforded to them. But they do not hold the executive power for the town.
They get
And that's what
some
we have now.
privileges like,
But you have to
Appointments and
complete the
something.
thought that in the executive, strong mayor is a voted position by the township.
Correct, and I think
So,
I said that at the beginning, but I
directly
think I can
elected.
build on that a little bit. A strong mayor is necessarily directly elected by the people of the town. The system that Millburn has now, the voters here in Millburn elect their township council, and the members of the council then vote for their weak mayor.
but
Okay.
It's like
the
a
system we have
parliamentary
now, actually going by the book, the township committee has both an executive and a policy role. That's the system we have now. We had chosen as a township committee through ordinance to appoint a business administrator that carries on most of the executive functions. But in terms of delineation of responsibility, it's still a little murky. We have been operating well as practice, but it's not as well defined legally what the delineation of responsibilities are, because you have a mix of policy and executive questions that are being considered by the committee right now. What would happen in a council manager form, for example, instead of the business administrator right now is like a chief administrative officer of the town. In a council manager form, he or she will become a chief executive officer of the town with the 5-member, 7-member, or 9-member committee holding only a policy role. Right, so that's that delineation which we kind of have created through ordinance will become more formal. So if you're asking me what would change if we were to end up with that recommendation and make that conclusion, not too much will change because we have this ordinance that gives a lot of power to the BA, but it will codify and make it more formal.
Okay, so it tightens things up.
So just to follow along, I think Shawna did an excellent job explaining that. I think, you know, when you say that the business administrator runs things in our town, that's sort of it's not codified that way. You know, it's sort of a tradition that is defined by our township ordinance. You know, theoretically, not that it would ever happen, I don't think. You know, the township committee could revise the business administrator ordinance because that is a locally defined ordinance,
In the future.
and they could change the roles and responsibilities of the business administrator. They could strengthen it, they could weaken it. But that's something that is currently an option under our township committee form of government. In a council manager form of government, the manager's responsibilities are defined by state statute. So we locally would not be able to change the executive function. The elected members of the governing body would only serve a legislative function. But part of their purpose is to appoint the manager.
And just to let everyone know, we've had two business administrators in my time here and that run the township phenomenally, and our bonds are AAA rated, so in that regard, you know, the township runs. The business administrator is the head, but when I've interviewed the police, the fire, the DPW, the rec, they don't really care who the township committee is, because it's the fire, burglary, whatever, they go and perform their function. So they, you know, and then, you know, they all have budgets and everything. And, you know, we're all blessed that we live in a very affluent community. So if they want, you know, the fire department needs a fire truck, or the police, you know, they have longevity for these things. So they have a 5-year plan, a 10-year plan, a 15-year plan. So in that regard, the departments run extremely smoothly. So next, gentleman in the back.
Just so I can get my arms more around.
Can you say your name, please?
Yeah, it's Rob Friedman.
Thank you, Rob.
I'm just using this as an example. I'm
Okay.
trying to get my arms around what powers a strong mayor would have versus the current form. Let's say, for example, the township wanted to replace the police chief. Right now, the administrator only has that power to do that. Under a strong mayor format, could the mayor fire the police chief, for example?
We should probably have our legal.
Yes, under a strong mayor format, the strong mayor is the head of all the departments, so yes, he or she would be able to remove the police chief.
But that's not necessarily true. If the township committee voted to replace the BA, if they don't get rid of the police chief, it could happen.
I guess that
No,
would
not
be
under
taking it
that's in the
another,
current form.
That's what
that
I'm
would be
saying.
taking it another step under
So
the
you gotta
current
look at
form,
the
there
different
could be some
extrapolations
pressures,
there.
that would be taking it another step, yes.
For the record, though, so we're a civil service town, removing a police chief, not that we want to do that, but it's actually a very complex process. And it's not something that, you know, would be very easy for our business administrator or directly elected strong mayor to do on a whim.
But if somebody was retiring, a strong mayor in that format would be responsible for picking the next person.
Yes.
As opposed to in a council manager form where the CEO
Yeah.
as a business manager,
The
the
other
business
issue-
manager would be
The
responsible.
other issue you have with the strong mayor form of government is, you know, let's say you're on a 4-year election cycle for that. Every 4 years, you could potentially be having, they could go and change, a bunch of employees.
You wanna say your name? That's what-
Sorry. I assume everyone knows who I am, because I'm the current mayor.
Still haven't stated your name.
Yeah, there you
Say
go.
it, Frank, say it.
Oh.
You're
a resident, we need to see your card.
With a strong mayor form of government, you also run the risk of not having someone with continuity. So for example, as it was pointed out, we've been very fortunate to have only 2 business administrators, in the past decades and decades. And what that means is, as the township committees come and go, we still have someone that has institutional knowledge, that has the relationships with all of the department heads and all of the employees, and can provide continuity. So the policy gets set by the township committee, or it's a municipal manager, it would be the township council. But the administrator or manager is the one that executes on that. It's like having a board of directors, at a company. The board sets the policy level, but then the CEO goes and implements the policies and has the latitude to do that in a way that makes the most business sense or makes the most sense for the township. So I would strongly caution this commission against a strong mayor form of government, because if we look at some of the leaders that we've had over the past few decades, imagine if they had more authority than they did,
Correct.
what an unmitigated disaster that could be. We're a town of very high achieving individuals. A lot of us have jobs. And if you had a strong mayor and that was their full-time job, look at the pool of applicants that you would have for that. Anyone that has a full-time day job would not necessarily be able to do that. So in Summit, they have a strong mayor, a full-time mayor. She was a doctor, she retired, she had to give up her practice. There's not a lot of people in town that are going to give up their finance jobs or their law jobs or their teaching jobs or, you know, whatever it may be to go and run the government. So then you end up getting potentially these sort of career politician types. And that to me is, that would be a disaster.
Commissioner Parkland, please
I was
respond.
hoping to make a comment. So from all the interviews that we did conduct, that was definitely a strong recommendation against a strong mayor. And the fact that we've had a weak mayor and that part has been working and the business administrator role is so strong already, there's kind of, I think that's one thing that we have been agreeing on and not flip-flopping at all. If I can, you know, for myself, I think that opinion has been, you know, driven into my head after doing that research. But in addition to that, we had, before Tim Gordon, and you guys interviewed Tim Gordon, I think it's a really important interview that if you could share a little bit of that information when he came into play, what was going on with the TC and how he changed it. Because I think that will also address why we have such a good, strong business administrator role that we want to keep.
So sure, so actually going back to Ms. Cosgrove's comment, the township committee, you know, we've had township committee in Millburn since 1857. And the original sort of background as to how township committee works is based off of the New England, you know, town hall format of government, where, you know, you have people that hold both the legislative and executive function. That was true pretty much up until the early 1980s. So what would happen was you would elect members to the township committee, and each member of the township committee would be responsible for one department. So one of the five would be responsible for police, the second would be responsible for fire, the third would be responsible for DPW, the fourth safe and rec. And generally, you know, the other members of the township committee would defer to that member who was responsible for it. Now, as we got to the early 1980s, we started in our town seeing that people were less likely to stand for election because that's quite a big responsibility. You know, having a layperson manage a police department is not really the best idea. So at the time, it was contemplated to move to, there was some history in 1972 where a council manager had been proposed. That didn't pass at the time, but by the time the early 1980s came around, there was desire to consolidate all of the executive authority into a business administrator position. So that's around 1984 is when those discussions were happening. We had to dig through the item archives. But essentially what happened was the township committee members at the time, they sat down Tim Gordon, who was to be the business administrator for 31 years afterward. They basically said, you know, we're looking for a business administrator. Tim Gordon said, okay, well, if you're going to do this, you have to be serious about it. I have to have real responsibility. I don't want you meddling in how all the department heads run day to day. You really sort of have to relinquish this executive authority, codify it in an ordinance, and really trust me on it. And there was a lot of discussion at the time. You know, elected members of the governing body might not necessarily want to give up their executive authority. But thankfully, I think thankfully, looking back, I think that ended up working out pretty well in our town. But again, that was codified through ordinance rather than state statute. So that's, and it can change with a majority of the current governing body if they so choose. You know, quite frankly, it's unlikely that 41 years of precedent is going to be overturned, but theoretically, that is something that is possible in our current township committee form of government.
And we don't know what we don't know in the future, right? Minus the crystal ball, which mine broke. I think it's hard to wrap yourself around what could happen in the future, and the things that we thought would happen in the future are happening. So in order to better safeguard for the future, there's other forms that we thought we would be considering in order to make this not changeable potentially. So that is a strong thing we're considering.
I have a question. My name is Roy Yu. My question is, when the Child Study Commission proposed on the either a general election day or special election day for the public, will this be itemized or is a bond package for the resident to vote?
So under the, the statute that I'm sorry, I'm having trouble seeing from over here.
That's okay.
Under the statute that governs the Charter Study Commission, it's the commission's job to present the voters with one unified proposal that includes all of the elements that we've been speaking about. So the voters do not get to parse out the various elements. The commission decides on them, and then they present it to the voters with a simple yes or no question.
But you'll have a report, right? You will have a
Absolutely.
report.
Yeah.
So you will
Absolutely.
see the things that we've considered in order to see why we've gotten to those places, which we'll have to decide. at
When
some
we
point.
get to those places.
When we get to those places.
Right.
So there'll be a report which states the rationale for our recommendation. That recommendation will be presented in a concise question. The question will be on the ballot, and the voters can say yes or no to that recommendation.
Right, so you won't get to
That's the
say, we
process.
want strong or weak mayor, and we want this and this.
Right.
You don't get to pick and choose multiple choice. I think that's part of what we have to do beforehand as your elected officials.
But
That
this
is-
question
that is,
a good one.
that is,
This question
phase
is a
three.
good one, and I'm wondering if we couldn't link to the report in some way on the ballot and someone could type in the URL, because so many residents here.
Electronic devices in the vote.
It's,
Right.
you're going in there.
That's
So you
true.
can't do that, but
You're
I
right.
imagine they will do a broad awareness campaign.
Yeah, so I was about
Yeah.
to say, it's like.
We'll do more of these sessions once the recommendations are.
And we're
ready.
hoping
Right.
the township will help us blast it out to all the residents through the different, and.
Yeah, I think you would.
Oh, yeah, I think I'm good on the blasting out. We'll get it out there. I just know that the hand's going up
I
against.
have something to add before we go.
Go ahead.
There is also, I believe, an opportunity to have an explanatory statement on the ballot to
That-
supplement the yes or no.
Correct. There is a very thorough explanatory statement that will explain all of the choices that the commission has made and that they are choosing to present to the voters. But I think that's different from what Mr. Yu was asking, which was whether kind of voters can piece it together on their own, which is not correct.
But that's really important to note, that they will have a chance to read that at the ballot point. So
And that's in addition, obviously, to the report, which will certainly be widely circulated.
Right, the report's not gonna be, hey, go into vote and read it and then make a decision. The report is gonna come out well before that.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
It's gonna be.
Multiple
Well,
times.
at least 60 days.
Michael?
So that's the rule.
Mike Becker, 50 years is still.
See you, Pete.
He has more hair.
You might have answered this before, but it's not just the short report, 2-3 pages that you can send to the whole town. You have to file, you said, and the examples that are posted are a 60 or 65 page document that has all of your research, everything you've done, and anybody's entitled to see that, right?
Yeah, council, can you answer that?
Elaborate.
Yes,
Can you elaborate on that?
absolutely. As you're absolutely correct, sir, that the reports that are generally generated in connection with charter study commissions are, 40, 50, 60 pages. So the commission, in conjunction with our office, will draft that report. And then it will come back here, the commissioners will all vote, demonstrating that what's contained in the report is their intent and is their recommendation for the future of Millburn. And at that point, it's a public document.
So even though all the planks are decided by the commission or recommended by the commission, they still have a right to read all the details that you've been through.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the
Yeah.
purpose of the
Absolutely.
report, is to lay out all of the considerations and the research that the commission has done through these interviews.
Chris, is there anyone online that wants to, or just?
There are no attendees online.
Chris?
Well, Chris Heinrichs, 15-year resident. First off, thank you for serving. You've done a great job. This is a lot of work. I've read probably most of the material, watched most of the videos, so it's definitely a lot, and you put in 10 times as much effort. I have a lot of thoughts about this, so please stop me when you get tired of me.
Bring it on, Chris.
Some of the council manager form of government seems to be a good choice, since we've codified in statute. Day-to-day operations don't seem like they'll change very much, moving from one to the other. So that's my limited understanding of that. In terms of some of the options we're talking about, definitely lengthening the terms to perhaps 4 years, coupling that with elections every other year seems to make a lot of sense. The council people could get a lot more done during that time frame and not have to worry about an election all the time. Elections are a lot of effort, they're a lot of money, and there's certainly election fatigue from the population to the extent that I've talked to them about it when we have it every year. So I hope those are some easier choices. Some of the harder choices, it sounds like we're trending towards the weak mayor. I was kind of questioning that in the beginning, but I think that's definitely the right choice. One strong mayor person can cause a lot of damage, and I'd certainly rather govern by consensus. And to that thought, I think expanding the number of council members would make a lot of sense to me. First off, just more people allows for more representation. We've done a fairly good job of having different parts of town represented, different political parties, different religions, but I think the more people up there allows for more representation. I do think there's a level of work effort. I think I've heard several committee members say they're on 6, 7, 8 committees. I don't know how they do that. I'm on the planning board and I go to all the township meetings, and that's a lot for me already. If I had 4 or 5.
Ben,
more-
how many committees are you on? 8?
I'm on 7 now.
7?
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so like,
No,
I
you're
don't know
right.
how they keep abreast of all the issues. So to some extent, the more members you have, you can spread out the work and get better at better decision making and more focus. So yeah, advocating for a larger, the Cranford gentleman was speaking from the perspective of the business administrator, and he kind of said, oh, lesser is better, of course, because he has more bosses.
Randolph.
Randolph, I'm sorry, Cranford, Randolph.
Yeah.
So I get his perspective. I would put less weight on that because I do think that the benefits would outweigh that. And of course, I think the last thing would be partisanship. I would definitely move to nonpartisan elections. Having recently participated in the last election, I will tell you it was awful. That I've been in this town 15 years. I served on the Board of Ed. I have a great working relationship with a whole lot of people. As soon as I put an R in front of my name, I turned into the devil. I was savaged by people I thought I knew just because I was an R. Before I ran, I polled several of my friends and I asked, are my kids going to be ostracized if I come out and run as a Republican? Just think of that. The fact that I had to ask that question in this town. Like, what kind of people are we going to get to run if they're so afraid of speaking their political affiliation? That should not happen, but it's a reality of life in our day and age. So I do think the current system really discourages people from running. Like you can say an independent can run now, it's really hard. I don't know how they would go up against the parties.
Why is
Most
it hard
of-
for independents in your view?
Most of our
So-
town, what is it, 43% of our town is
43%,
independent? In my
yeah.
mind, they are totally disenfranchised.
Right.
Right, if the one party primary picking the people who are gonna run and they're most likely to win, I bet there are scenarios where less than 10% of the population can choose the candidate who will ultimately win. We've
To
seen that in
answer-
districts.
To answer your first comment, the folks that we have interviewed recently, I'd venture to say from 2018 to present, there seems to be election campaign fatigue, big time.
Yes.
Big time. So what happens, as you pointed out, 5 TC members can get along great for 6 months. And all of a sudden, they're gonna run. And this person next to me is a rat bastard or something like that, you know? Not really, you know? And then nothing gets done. 100% agreement
And
with you.
even one more step from that, the previous 5 years from when I got involved in Board of Ed and town of all that, most of my friends refuse to talk about the town government. They're just like, it's a partisan mess, can't stand it. So it actually prohibits people from learning about issues in their local government because it's so divisive.
Well, you know, it's interesting for the last I don't know, 6 years, let's say, I have been campaigning for folks for the Board of Ed. And the last 2 years, you gotta trust me, the last 2 years, because Board of Ed, as we all know, is not partisan, right? You are, you know, you are who you are, you have your credentials, you served on PTOs, The last 2 years, the way the environment now in this country, folks have asked me and the person I've been campaigning for, are you a D or an R? And that's a shame. That is a shame, because we have some great people in this town.
So I see Ms. Cosgrove, your hand is up before you start speaking. Because you already said, sure, just generally, I just want people to let Ms. Cosgrove say what she has to say, because I think her perspective is important. It might be different than a lot of people in the room, but we need to hear it and it needs to be on the record, and we need to have both sides. So I don't want this turning into a discussion or an argument. I want her to have her ability to say what she needs to say. So go ahead.
Okay, so mainly, well, background is I've just returned from Washington DC advocating on behalf of conservation with our senators and congressmen. So I had a measure of the political climate there, not conservation wise. But anyhow, I think that even if you, all right, dial it back, I mean, because I think that it's really ramped up in Washington because of our current administration, especially conservation wise, what's going on. But even if you take the parties out of it locally and make it nonpartisan, I think people will always be able to figure out what your values are, what your party is, whether you're unaffiliated, affiliated, but you just ask opinions. And just because there'll be no parties doesn't mean, as competitive people wanting to win, there will probably be stuff said that will hurt people's feelings, because that's how people sometimes get when they run for election or re-election or whatever. And I think just taking the political parties out of it doesn't take away a competitive situation when you really want that position. You should be kinder, but that not necessarily is going to be true, whether you take the politics out of it or not. It's a competitive thing.
Do you see an advantage though to the party system in local? I'm asking it as a theoretical question.
Yeah, I think theoretically, you look nationally, you see a value system. Potentially that would
Hey,
Republicans have state values.
Let's get him removed
And that's
from the
bullshit.
Bullshit.
You know nothing about me,
Stop
nor
it.
my background.
Let's get him
I
removed
resent
from the meeting.
Bullshit.
I resent that.
He's clearly inappropriate.
I'm gonna end the meeting.
Well, it had to be said.
Right.
No, it had to be said.
Yeah.
It has such a negative
You know
connotation,
what?
and I'm sick of it.
You know, we're not gonna end the meeting, we're just gonna ask you to leave.
Yeah.
So this is strike two.
Okay, good.
Before we proceed, Chris, can you just lay some ground rules for?
Yeah.
The dialogue
You
is a
folks
courtesy.
are supposed to.
I'm sorry, she made a negative.
No,
comment
no,
about
no.
President Trump.
I'm gonna ask you to leave.
Okay,
I'm
and
gonna
then
ask you
she
to
goes
leave.
and does this.
I'm gonna
That's
ask you
fine,
to
I'm
leave.
gonna leave.
Good.
I'm happy to go. I just can't sit and listen to this partisan
okay.
bullshit.
That's
You don't
okay.
have to.
You don't have to.
You don't
This
have
is
to.
Good, it's a beautiful
voluntary.
day
Oh,
outside.
It is.
So,
All right,
with that said, council,
yes, would you just please review the ground rules for discourse at the meeting, or I'm happy to do so.
Please,
if you-
please.
okay.
That'd be great.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, the purpose of today's presentation and discussion here is not to weigh in on larger politics nationally. The purpose of this presentation is to discuss the Charter Studies Commission's work with regard to the future of Millburn. And that means that I'm going to ask that everyone has an opportunity to speak. People might have measured responses to questions that have been made, but I'm going to ask, as I said a moment ago, that people be given the opportunity to finish their statements and to raise their opinions And then the next person will have the opportunity to raise an opinion, okay? I don't think that the kind of, getting into mudslinging is not going to be productive. So let's.
And getting other opinions that you don't agree with is good.
Yeah.
Let's just get it out. You don't necessarily have to comment on it. Let's just get it out so we can hear it. It's good to get other opinions out on the table, whether you agree or not. Let's just get it out on the table so we can consider it.
Yeah.
She was interrupted and then we can go next.
Oh, Ms. Cosgrove, can you?
I didn't mean to offend anybody. I'm just
It's all right.
saying my opinion that I think people wanna know the person and
Mm-hmm.
And I think they're entitled to know the person and they'll research as much as they want. And I think just saying that, you know, we're not gonna have parties. If people care, they'll look into it. If they want to dig deeper, they can. If they can, and the people that are really sharp will talk to those people who are running and find out truly what they believe. It's not, you know, that you gotta distill it down, how much work you wanna do and who you're gonna vote for and just how much time you're gonna put into it. It's
I think
not,
he was starting to.
or
say
you
something.
just look at your friend and you ask them who you vote for. I mean, I think that a lot of
Right.
people in this town don't know what's going on.
I just
That's
wanna.
correct.
That I think we can all agree.
We don't agree on that. That's because we don't have the item.
Right, you don't have a newspaper.
You were starting to say, I thought you were starting to say something about when Corey asked, did you see advantages to the party system? You were just starting to opine something. I just wanna make sure you get a chance to say what you're saying.
Before you were shut.
I think having a party system is good because it's a starting point, and then you can distill from there which way you wanna go with it. You know, you could find out more about the particular candidate, but you have a starting point. And where to go. No one stops you from talking to either candidate, but you have a starting point to poke in and ask some questions to see if their values align with yours. And your values for what you want of this town, you know, where we're heading, what direction. That's more important ultimately, because in either party, you may decide this person is awful. That's the personality type I don't want in charge.
Dr. Khan?
Do you, just as a follow-up to that, do you think that it's a disadvantage that BOE elections are nonpartisan, given that there is no starting point, so to speak, from which to understand? Or I'm just trying to understand based on your
I
statement.
think that if you're lazy, it's good to know what party a person's with, if you're just gonna, you know, or you're gonna be lazy and ask a few more questions. It does a little bit of your homework for you. I mean, no one's gonna I don't know how to explain it correctly, but I think it makes it easier for someone who's lazy or actually someone who wants a starting point to then delve into someone who you think might share your values and deciding whether or not they don't and what you want in this town before you might start looking the other way or you look both. It depends how much homework you want to do, but I think it gives you a starting point.
Ben?
Yeah, hi. Ben Stoller, current member of the Township Committee. From a working perspective, I assume you interviewed everybody on the Township Township Committee today, all 5 of the Township Committee members?
Yes.
Okay, all 5?
Yes.
Okay, and then when you interviewed, the level of toxicity / divisiveness that how do you account for how much of the issue that is in terms of how people make their decisions? I think it's wrong to say values are determined by R or a D. They're determined by the amount of work you put into this community, the amount of kids you've coached, whether you stand for big development, nonsensical development versus lower development versus fields for our kids versus saving a duck. How do you look at that? What came back from your guys' interviews?
Do we answer that in a moment? Because I kind of feel like that might be answered in a bit if we have a couple of other people ask a few questions, because I think it might tackle some other questions, but we'll put a pin in that.
No.
I think Linda.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
So,
I'm sorry, I don't know your name.
we're like totally behind nonpartisan.
If we can just go ahead.
Linda Bonniers,
Okay.
34 years in Milburn, not very involved in the community, but we pop in and out. We do follow the bouncing ball. I am a retired communications professional, And I do think this town lacks good communication strategy and processes, and I would love to help if we could. I think that, you know, you have to take baby steps. So I kind of really disagree with I forgot your name.
Jean.
Okay. Because we are very divided, and if we don't start to take one step forward, we're just gonna continue to be, I think you used the word lazy, and just go with the D or the R, and to be able to start to branch out from that, I think is a good thing. My second question would be though, how challenging is it going to be to get people to run in a nonpartisan environment because of the division of the D and the R? I spoke to a neighbor who, people want to run, but then they get caught up in, being classified as a D or an R, or, and I would imagine it's challenging to get people to want to commit to time to be on the township committee. Not everybody, I mean, my husband was on a board and our co-op, and I know people like beg people to run because people have lives and they don't want to do it. So is this going to make it a little bit more problematic to get good citizens to want to run?
Are you saying
We
size is
have,
gonna make it problematic? Are you saying?
Just because so many people want to be still identifying as an R or a D. Do we feel, have you interviewed people, and do you feel that you're gonna get more people that want to be running?
Yes. Oh, Ben, you want to answer that?
I feel like Ben could answer that potentially.
So Ben, I am on a nonpartisan form of government, but it's interesting, I was really listening carefully. I was part of the Democratic apparatus in town too, I still am, I'm a Democratic.
In Red Bank.
In Red Bank. Right, so
You're
in
not
fact,
the
I'm running, I
pro-process.
just filled out my paperwork today to run for Democratic committeeman from the 8th district where I'm at, but so switching to nonpartisan, was something I had to struggle with. Like there is an advantage. I know you had this testimony. I didn't give it, but one thing I liked about partisan, as somebody who's employed and my kids and I'm busy, is that they would come up to you and say, well, all you have to do is run, man. You don't have to raise any money. We got a nice operation here, and I was part of it. I would go to Democratic events and put in my $50, to pay, and it was all kind of set up for you. And then the campaign, chairman would, we'll just recycle this election stuff that we've used before, and we'll put your name in it instead of Sandra. And in that way it was kind of nice. That was sort of a nice system, and it made it easier to run, certainly if you had financial challenges, which my wife and I do. So that was one of the considerations I'm trying to address, one of the things, that was sort of wrestling with somebody. Are there advantages to partisan? And I would say on some level that's a consideration, because if you're running nonpartisan, you have to do all your own stuff. You have to raise your own money. You have to start your little organization. You have to have your own attorney. You have to have your own treasurer, and that's all not set up for you necessarily. In Red Bank, we're running our own political operation. It's not the Democratic Party, even though I'm still a community member. We stay only involved in state things, supporting governor, or we're staying out of the Democratic Party in Red Bank didn't even make an endorsement of all the Democratic. Everybody serving is a registered Democrat who won in the nonpartisan election, including myself. But and everybody knows my affiliation. I go on Facebook and social media, and they know where I stand. But I think that in my testimony to you guys, one of the things I kind of like about nonpartisan is that I can knock on every door. I mean, we have a Democratic majority in my town, so the strategy kind of was to just get the Democratic vote out and you win it. But I really like being a town activist, that I would knock on every door, and I would knock on the Republican gentleman's door and the unaffiliated voters' door, and I would like to think that we won. The council, as well as the change of government, with the support, a broad base of support that for unaffiliated voters, because I agree with the gentleman, but they are very unaffiliated in Red Bank. It's one of the reasons I voted for the nonpartisan, because I just thought that was morally abhorrent that 40% of my town was basically cut out of the process, because the partisan system is sort of it's set up for the two parties to just run the show. And if you had the temerity to run in Red Bank as an unaffiliated voter, you know, you were buried somewhere on the ballot. It was like comical, really. You know, and I found that offensive.
So did
You know.
you get more,
And we do have, well, last time I read, I mean, we only had a short term, because what we did is we have it toggled, so elections are every 2 years, because we had the madness of having every 1 year elections. You know, we had elections every year, and it was madness. And, you know, it took a personal toll on me and many others. And so we switched to 2 years. So I drew the short straw, and I only got a 2-year term when we changed the form of government. So I just ran again. So I had like a 2.5-year term, and now I have a full 4-year term going forward. So I don't know if I answered your question. I also, if you don't mind, I wanted to address the mayor running, because I did disagree a little bit with the gentleman who spoke in the meeting I attended. We chose to have a directly elected mayor. We had the option of not doing it. Now, we also did that in Red Bank for a while, but I find that voters, you know, I'm a door-to-door guy. I don't have a lot of money, so I got to knock on
Ben, just to clarify, directly elected.
Directly elected mayor, right? We have a weak mayor, as you say, although Billy Portman would not like calling him weak. Okay, but Billy, you're weak. We have Billy Portman is my mayor. So he runs our meetings and he has a vote. It's like a board of directors, you know. And he has a few appointment powers, and you know, he also sets the agenda. So the mayor has actual power. I think weak is a little, you know, is used in government nerd talk. But actually, our mayor has a fair amount of power. He has a little more power than I do as a regular councilman, but it's not like the strong mayor form of government where they're kind of all powerful. So anyway, I personally, and Red Bank chose, we went with a directly elected mayor, because I find it, as a voter, kind of offensive that some committee that, you know, just decides among themselves who the mayor's gonna be. I guess that's what you do here, but I don't like it. Other towns neighboring me do that. Middletown, everybody hates it there. And so we weren't going to change that. I think, you know, the mayor is your face of your town. I think everybody should have a say in who that is. And it shouldn't just be, you know, somebody who knows somebody and the friends and they decide together, you know, how to do it. I mean, I get it and maybe well intended, but I think personally that's my preference. Also, if you think about passing a referendum, and you have to think, because by the way, I went and campaigned for our charter change. You know, we did our report, and then you know, because I was on the Charter Study Commission, and then we knocked on doors and had meetings like this actually. Q&A sessions, we called them, we did a mailing actually, we had a lawyer look over to make sure it was nice and nonpartisan and all that stuff. We raised a little bit of money to do it, I had a fundraiser at my house. You know, so we didn't have any problems finding a candidate in our first cycle, I'll tell you that. We had 16 people running, something like that, a lot of candidates. It was also, and I also just want to say, and I think I said this a little bit in testimony, elections are still going to be messy. And that's not going to go away. Don't be naive. I mean, people can be ridiculous, you know, and you know, and we all make mistakes too, we're humans. So you just have to apologize when you make a mistake. And I think you love your neighbors, and you know, whether they have. I mean, I've worked and vote and supported Republicans running for office, and I do my homework. You know, some people, I'm not a fan of President Trump personally, but you know, not every Republican actually is. You know, and I knocked on doors. I found a lot that weren't. So, you know, things are complicated, and some people love Trump and they voted for me, even though they know who I am, because I was aligned with them on the partisan issue. I served on the Board of Education. Our schools have been doing fine for 19 years. So I'm very proud of the fact that a gentleman down the street with me with a Trump flag, probably, I think he said he voted for me, and I believe him.
Thank you, Ben.
That's it.
Thank you. Noel, you had your hand up.
Yeah, so Noel Bigman, Short Hills resident for 23 years. Also current member of the Board of Education. So my comments today are personal comments, not on behalf of the board. I have to classify myself as a little bit naive to all the inner workings of the Charter Commission, but I am learning a lot today, and I actually appreciate both sides of the comments, because I think it shows there are obviously differences between town members, and all those things have to be considered. From my perspective, living in the town for so many years and raising my children here, I do think one of the greatest assets of our town is our school district. And I'm a little naive to the Charter Commission inner workings, but I'm less naive to the politics of the town, and even less naive to the economics of the town. So my thought today, just listening to everything and trying to distill the information is I really haven't heard much of which form of government is better for Milburn financially. And, you know, I'm a CPA and an MBA, so I don't think in non-logical or ephemeral terms. I actually just think in black and white numbers, and I have a balance sheet in my head and an income statement at most times for most decisions that I make. And what I realize is that this township has the highest property taxes in the entire state of New Jersey. The last thing that I saw was, I think the average property value is taxed at $24,567, but that might be outdated because I know taxes increase and not decrease. About half of that goes to our school district. And then I realize there's other funding that comes from county and state sources. My general thought and maybe opinion would be, I would select in your role, the best form of government that from a financial standpoint would be beneficial for the residents of the town. And I say it not knowing what that is, but I think of that as really a high priority because, you know, again, living here for 23 years, I actually have a lot of friends over the last 5 or so, 10 years that have decided to move out of this town. And they move to lower tax states, you know, they have high incomes or high asset values. They easily move to another state with really the taxes as the consideration for their second or third residence.
Well, state versus.
Yeah, but yeah, they're moving.
City.
Thank you, Noel.
Yeah, so
Quick comment.
well, I'm not entirely done. So in terms of like voting for the right form of government, I think there are grants that come from the county and perhaps from the state. I would try to understand, I would want to know which form of government is beneficial. So if we go from, say, partisanship to nonpartisanship, does that impact our financial relationships with the county and state? Or vice versa, you know, like just to put that out as a consideration.
So I just want to make one quick comment. I'd love to refer to our attorney because I think you'll have the best answer for what's financially, you know, prudent. I think from a value perspective, I think as realtors, as your wife and I are, and you know, Mrs. Wife is, there are different considerations. What makes up the higher taxes in our town in perspective to what value is actually much lower than many other towns within our county. So, you know, when we're selling other towns, there's, you know, there's much higher taxes in certain other towns that are selling for half the price of what we have. So you have to kind of consider that too. But from a perspective of, so that's value. But from a perspective of government, I would love our attorney to actually answer your question.
Before that also, I will encourage you to go back and watch some of the videos, and when the report comes out, we have interviewed people, and the concept of whether partisan government is better or worse from a financial perspective and tying to the county and things like that were absolutely points of conversation.
Great.
And so you will definitely have that information when the report comes out as to whether, you know, being partisan and more partisan tied to the county, whether that funnels more money or not to us. So that definitely was covered. So I encourage you.
And whether we're 25,000 responsible for the primary, does that go away if we're nonpartisan? So,
Right.
but I think we should.
That doesn't go away.
It doesn't go away.
Yeah,
That
so if it doesn't go away, then, but I still think our.
Right.
I was actually, Corey gave exactly the answer that I was going to give, because the numbers are not really something that's baked into the statute here. It does come down, you're talking about county grants and things like that. There was excellent testimony about relationships and maintaining the relationships with the county. So I would refer you back to that because I think that's going to answer your question the best.
So, just to let you folks know, when we've interviewed, you know, township committee people, past and present, it doesn't matter if one is a D or an R. If our Essex County Executive, Joe DiCrescenzo, you know, Alex McDonald or whoever, you know, calls up and says, hey, you know, a county road needs to be paved, gets paved. You know, if we have a hurricane, you know, the county comes in. So, but I don't think it's the commission responsibility to talk about to have policy for financial. No, just to put that out there.
But we have investigated the topic and,
We have,
and there
yeah.
is on the record comments about that, so it would inform and I encourage you to, and once it comes out, you know, you can flip to the sections.
Frank, and then that gentleman in the back, just Frank.
I kind of want to disabuse people of the notion that having that D or that R next to you really says anything about your values. And maybe I'm an anomaly, but quite honestly, and most people know this, I was a Democrat for a very long time, came to this town, still a Democrat, changed parties to run against the Democrat machine. Now, my values did not align with those of the National Republican Party. They just don't. I mean, there's some things that are good. There's a lot that's not. And then I look at the National Democratic Party right now. There's some things I like. There's a lot that I don't. I don't fit into either one of those boxes. And in talking to a lot of people in town, I think there's a lot of people in town that are in that same exact position I'm in, where there's some Republican policies they like, there's some Democratic policies they like. There's some stuff they hate about the Republican Party, there's some stuff they hate about the Democratic Party, right? But it's a binary two-party system. I think that's the problem. 43% of the voters in town are independents. They're unaffiliated voters. So if I knock on a door and I tell someone I'm running for township committee and, you know, I tell them I'm a Republican, automatically they're going to assume certain things about me. And I know this because I've been at that door, and then they'll say, oh, well, what's your stance on abortion? Why don't you think women have the right to choose? And I have to say, what are you talking about? I think women should have the right to choose. I had one person, I knocked on the door, and they said, well, you know, your party doesn't believe in, you know, LGBT rights. And I said, well, I do. I'm in a same-sex marriage, right? So honestly, I think it's lazy for people to just go and look at the D or the R and assume that that candidate has those values, because that's not necessarily the case. It really isn't. And so I think it's sort of unfair to a large portion of our town, 43%, for us to continue to have this two-party system that forces people that want to run to choose. Because we've seen what happens when someone tries to run as an independent. Diane Aglow did that. David Morrow did that. They got spanked. And that was because our system, when it's a two-party system, people are going to gravitate towards that one party or the other. They don't give the independents a chance. But if we have nonpartisan levels of playing.
The gentleman in the back.
Does, first of all, it seems, I'm almost positive, but please correct me if I'm wrong.
All right,
That
you're
when
wrong.
Story of my life. You're right. It seems that when the Board of Ed is in the process of the elections, that's not partisan, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Would that process be some sort of a litmus test as to whether or not that process would work with the township council? Meaning, when people vet Board of Ed candidates, when I vetted them, I did my research, and it took time to do my research. I don't know if everyone has the time to do it, but I did it. I think it's not a bad exercise. Has everyone kind of considered that process in terms of whether or not the township committee process on a nonpartisan basis would work? Did that ever come into your discussions?
So I think there were a couple interviews where folks we interviewed said, if you are to go to nonpartisan, there should be more robust avenues for civic discourse. I think the annual debates put on by the Short Hills Association is a good avenue for that. But I do think that there should be more opportunity. There always should be more opportunities for members of the public to learn about the candidates for whom they're voting. So, you know,
But the analogy to the Board of Ed definitely has come up before. Like, hey, look, we do it nonpartisan in Milburn for the Board of Ed. Might that be a model for making a decision for us? That definitely has.
Correct. And then I got a good sense of whether or not that person is gonna align with my interests, even though that was.
And if I could just
technically
bring
not
it back to,
partisan.
because I think this connects to Ben's question, and I think just more holistically, if we can answer that.
Yeah.
We did absolutely, you know, everyone can see the questions that we've asked, that were part of the report as well. We asked every current TC member and former TC member the same question, you know, whether they believe, you know, partisan or nonpartisan would be better, it says it cause divisiveness or not. And everyone had an opinion. Of the current folks, you know, I mean, you could see most of the recordings, but I think there were definitely folks who were concerned that if you aren't an R or a D, to Ms. Cosgrove's point, you won't understand someone's values, and if the core values are so diametrically opposed, which I know you've countered, you know, they might not know. So yes, people were concerned that not having a party label will not give the public enough information. And yes, to your gentleman in the back point that you will do more research, but it was definitely a concern. So to answer your question, there were people from the past TC from years back and from recent history who were definitely concerned and did not want to consider going to nonpartisan. So we're absolutely taking all those voices very seriously because they served and they ran. And they did run in a divisive campaign, but sometimes they ran in a divisive campaign even against other Democrats. So it didn't seem to align along party lines. It aligned along personalities, perhaps. And there were fights, you know, for mayoral positions in the past, and people just didn't get along. So it just kind of matters, you know, historically, personalities with civility overrode personalities with a lack of civility. So I hope that answers both of your questions to some degree.
Oh, that
And
gentleman,
right there, you're
right there.
Michael Pasternak, 28-year resident. I'm not a citizen yet, so I haven't voted for anyone. But hopefully that'll come up soon. I think there's a broader theme here that's pretty important, which is the idea of localism. I think that the tide is turning towards localism, and people, I think, need to accept responsibility along with the authority of electing a township committee. I don't think you should go down the party line anymore. That's completely inappropriate. We're going to be dealing with a lot of shocks, a lot of environmental issues, a lot of economic issues. And I think we should be looking, as Chris was saying, to candidates who want to serve and want to serve their local community. And I think that's consistent with people who are thinking in terms of ownership as opposed to just passing through and voting on the party line. So I would strongly go with a nonpartisan view. And I think there are ways that as a community you can support that, rather than it being like a middle school or high school, you know, who's going to be the beauty king popularity contest. You know, you can say, the town will fund you with $2,000, and you'll have these consistent formats, and it won't be what party backed you or what your fundraising campaign is completely, you know, that will tend to smooth things out. Just thought I'd share that.
Thank you. Chris?
I challenge anyone to tell me a difference between the party platforms in the last election. I bet you
You mean
can't.
local?
Yeah, the last local election. I bet you can't, because the election wasn't about that. And in my mind, it should have been mostly about that. And to answer the question, if you looked at the platforms, what was written, they were pretty much exactly the same. But nobody knows that, because we didn't talk about it enough. We talked about, you're Magna, you're bad, you can't serve. You're an anti-Semite, you're, you know, lie about housing. It was like ridiculous issues. But I do think, again, as an argument for nonpartisan, it would remove that and focus on the local issues.
Thank you.
Can I bring up a quick point before we call on those two folks there? Because someone who we met with, Jerry, you were there. When we met with a group of folks, just a little focus group of folks who ran against us and lost, because we really wanted to make sure the voices who ran against us are really heard, because they ran and they cared enough to serve and to do the research. And we fed them a lot of focaccia at my house, and then we kept meeting because we want to make sure we have that discourse, especially from folks who really wanted to be up here and didn't have a chance to. We wanted to make sure their voices were extra heard. So I visited personal homes, we had focus groups, we made sure we reached out with phone calls and emails, and there's a constant communication. And one person brought up something really, really great that could help our civility, that while we can't recommend it per se, but I think in the event that, if there isn't support from R's and D's, and we don't know if the local committee folks will support candidates. I know in other towns, they've agreed not to support candidates. But we don't know what the committees will do here in the event that it's nonpartisan, so.
Just to clarify, sorry to jump in, technically speaking, even if the township votes to change and have nonpartisan elections, the local parties could, on their own initiative, come out and endorse
And
candidates.
endorse, yeah.
Right.
So-
It's just like if the American Legion comes
Endorses
out
somebody.
and wants to endorse Chris Heinrich or something like that.
Right. And a wise person said, they thought it would be really great to actually have what I would try to create is this little think tank of people, leaders from all the different civic associations and nonprofits and those who care to join for whatever it is, once a quarter. Kind of what the Short Hills Association I know has been trying to do as well, is get people together, but there's no unifying place where you feel that way. So if there's just a group and this person offered to head it up, she said, if we just have local leaders just come together and like have the discourse so that when people might be lazy, they can go to this group of, because maybe their friends are in it, to say, who should I vote for? Who's like, what's going on? What's the scuttlebutt? And that's kind of what happens to some of us who are out there in the public. They're like, what's the scuttlebutt? Who should I vote for? I get the calls all the time. So there are ways for the community to come together, whether it's partisan, nonpartisan, whatever happens, to create a community of people who are more informed than others, and those who might have, more time because their kids aren't here, they didn't have kids, will hopefully serve the community. I feel some recruits out there.
Yeah, we interviewed, to Joanna's point, all 14 candidates that
Well,
ran
excluding us.
for this commission. And the theme that I got out of it was policy. You can't get into the little nuances of,
But there are some people
easy.
very concerned about not having an R or a D representation, and those are valid concerns because I think that echoes
Mhm.
other people in the township. There aren't just those singular voices. I mean, we're hearing it in the room, we heard it from a few people, we visited, and very strong opinions. Very, very, very strong opinions.
So can I add a comment quickly?
Go ahead.
I know we're spending a lot of time on partisan versus non-partisan, but the way, at least I look at things, there are two different questions we're trying to answer. One is, what is the appropriate form of government for our township? And any form of government can either have partisan or non-partisan elections. But in the fight for partisan versus non-partisan, let's not lose sight of whether our current form of government is appropriate or not. And I also want to state, and maybe Susan, if you can correct me here, if I'm wrong, that the partisan versus non-partisan question does not actually need a charter commission process for the township to address that or change that part. The township government in the future can recommend one or the other form and the public can vote on that, right, in a referendum to change partisan versus non-partisan elections. But to change the form of government itself does need some process. Charter commission is one of the ways to do it. And we're doing it once in, 50, 60 years, so that this is a once in a 3-generation opportunity for us to address a structural deficiency or not in our form of government. So when people think about voting on the question we'll present, I just want people to understand that partisan versus non-partisan is more of a temporal question. It can be changed in the future within the form of government that we choose as people to have for our townships.
It's a question of elections, it's not a question of governance.
Correct. So we should try to, in our minds, separate the two. Think of one as more of a structural, fundamental change if we opt for a change, and think of the other as maybe something we try and change again in but we can do it only once every 10 years.
It's actually, I believe it's 4.
4 years?
Every 4, yeah.
Oh, really? I thought it was longer. So we are not stuck to that partisan or non-partisan question. If we change it today, we can change it back again if it's not working. I just wanted to put it out there.
But we are stuck with the form of government.
We are stuck with the form of government,
If we don't change
correct.
something now, whether it's the amount of years,
Right, so I
the
mean.
term cycle, the strong mayor, weak mayor, all of the other things we were just discussing, that chance doesn't come up until you do this process again.
Yeah, so to be clear, under different forms of, let's just say larger umbrella terms, forms of government. So we have a township committee form of government right now. The only choice that we have is a 3-member governing body or a 5-member governing body. Right now we have 5. There is no option for nonpartisan under township committee, And there's no option for a directly elected mayor under township.
I should have said, we have to be under the new Faulkner Act, the form of government to be partisan or non-partisan.
So once you transition to a Faulkner Act form of government such as council manager, there you have options. You have 5, 7, or 9 member council, you have directly or indirectly elected mayor, you have partisan versus non-partisan, you have concurrent, which is everyone gets elected every 4 years, versus staggered, which is elections every other year. And I think I didn't say indirectly versus directly elected mayor. So once you move to a council manager, you don't have to, if you're staying within a council manager, you don't need to redo the whole charter study process. You can put a referendum directly on the ballot to change one of those features, if that makes sense.
Did you have a question?
In the back.
No.
In the back.
Well, yeah.
Very back row.
I know, way else. All right, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm Wei. I'm also the part of the board that member, so I just present my personal opinion and not present. I have a couple of quick questions. And assume that we change the election from partisan to non-partisan. There's any correlated changes or new rules regarding to the campaign finance? So that's so for example, change to non-partisan and whether the campaign, related to finance, there's any changes or limitations.
Attorney question
about that.
So the campaign finance rules come from the state via ordinance, but I suspect that what you're really, I'm sorry, via statute. I'm living in municipal world here via statute. But I think what you're really getting at is how, if at all, the partisan, nonpartisan switch will change the elections, and that's something that I think that Ben can probably speak to based on his experience, if you wouldn't mind.
Well, that's, I mean, we have to follow somewhat different rules. I mean, it was a lot easier, like I said before, when I had a Democratic Party, they would do all that. And now, we have to pick a treasurer, I have a treasurer, I ran on a ticket. They asked me a lot about tickets, and one of the reasons I ran on a ticket is to share, it's hard doing it, to run a campaign. I ran on the Board of Ed, usually I was unopposed. But in the council, when we had a mayor and part of that campaign, there was a lot of people involved, a lot of money was spent. I think our side spent 80,000 and our opponents actually, I think were like 118.
And your ticket was how many, just so folks can, in case they didn't.
I had 7 on the ticket when this is after the charter study process made its recommendation and it was passed. And by the way, the public can turn it down. A lot of towns turn down the recommendations of charter.
Right. The last time we did it,
they get turned down too. So we had sort of like reset the whole government election. So there was two candidates for mayor on one ticket, we had 10, and then our ticket, and there was an unaffiliated voter or running independent of that in the middle of it all. She literally grew the spot right in the middle between the 2 tickets. It was kind of funny. And so because it was randomly determined where you were on the ballot. But it is a little different. I have to I get a donation over $100. I have to keep record of that. I have to file it. I make a report. I have thankfully somebody in my life that does know state campaign finance law, and I use him to help me figure out the paperwork because there's certain filing dates. I know this is very nerdy and boring, but it is a little different, I think, from partisan. Also, you don't get county money and things like that. You're in partisan campaigns, sometimes like the state committees, so Republican or Democrat will funnel money to you.
That's what I tried to ask.
There may be a way to do it, but I don't think, it's a little bit different. You're not really part of the party apparatus. Now, there's a lot of messiness in campaign finance laws, and I don't pretend to be an expert on it. And, people make donations that surprise me. I think I took a donation from a real estate group. There's a variety of people who, for one reason or another, don't donate us money. And again, when you're nonpartisan, I wound up raising money from Republicans as well as Democratic sources, so it's a little bit different.
Yeah, I think my question is more like, if we really want to go nonpartisan and the candidates kind of represent nonpartisan views, that's maybe just my naive understanding, then the funding sources to support this candidate conceptually is to be not partisan, machine supported. So, but anyway, I'm definitely you.
I think the answer, unfortunately, is all the above.
Yeah, that's why.
Wait, I asked that question, also, I forget which, township committee, or out of town or another town, and it's all state regulated, because I wanted to put a cap on it. and I got hammered. So, no way. You're out of here. You're not getting a question. Discuss.
My question was, as far as nonpartisan, I think it was half said by you, I don't know.
Oh, Linda.
Linda, was, I think you were saying, and that's my question, part of the goal of being nonpartisan to get more people to run as candidates. And did you find that was true where people went nonpartisan? Do you get more candidates? And obviously that she was bringing out and it's unless you're a good fundraiser and you're running nonpartisan, it's expensive. You have to have money. It seems like, at least from what I'm hearing.
We've been told by folks who did change to a nonpartisan that it was potentially, they didn't have to fundraise as hard necessarily, because it was fighting less about the R or D. It was more about, and less people came out to vote too. So depending on the certain times of year, like if you had a May election, because that was an option for certain forms of government. So when they changed from May elections to November elections, more people came out to vote. But if it was a May and nonpartisan, you had a low turnout, but the turnout that came out was very avidly for their candidates and they researched.
Right.
Did it represent the entire township? Not. And so they changed that particular, town, said, well, actually, we decided let's go from May to November. And the November elections really boosted the amount of people who came out to vote. And certainly when you had national elections, more people came out to vote to begin with.
And the views we have heard so far is that if you don't have the partisan label, more people are encouraged to run for the positions.
They do.
That's what we have heard people say. Obviously,
But it's a bit more theoretical. I don't know that we've seen as many have cycles. For example, the second time you guys ran, you ran totally unopposed. People had faith in you, obviously. So you didn't necessarily have to campaign much, right? So your money spend was presumably a lot lower in that second cycle.
That's right.
Because it's like, okay, I'm not opposed.
I think there's also a point to be made about, in a partisan system, because you have two parties, each party is going to try to field a candidate, even if there's nothing really wrong per se, right? Like, I think in Red Bank, now that you're nonpartisan, you ran unopposed. I view that as a testament to you guys governing well, that, people aren't upset, people don't want to,
I think we were also exhausted.
That's true, but I think, and I've seen this in some of the other towns where, stuff might be going swimmingly, right? But just because, two people are a member of a certain party and the other party just says, well, we need to field some candidates because we have some vacancies and we just need to, I think there's that dynamic that also needs to be considered in terms of, are people really just, fielding it for continuity purposes of having the party apparatus be in town, or is it,
And then Jerry, on top of that, what we've heard, getting back to nonpartisan, but the type of government is having elections every year where you have these sort of forced animosity has created a lot of situations in town that people are looking to see if we can try to correct. Because, you have, like Jerry said, if you have a partisan election, each party is necessarily going to put somebody up to run. And then on top of that, if you have a form of government that you have election every single year, now you have combative elections such that the last quarter of the year, basically people are sitting on the township committee and they're running for election instead of working on policy matters. And it sort of slows down the ability to get stuff done in our government is what we're hearing.
Michael?
Yeah, I thought it was 10 years before we could change. Did you correct that and say it was 4 years?
Yeah.
Okay, so did I also hear that if you want to change what I call planks underneath the umbrella of the particular political system you're talking about, it requires a referendum. It can't be a unanimous vote of the 5, 7, 9, whatever the amount of members they are. Did you say it required a referendum to change one plank?
Correct, that gets done by the voters of the town, not by the council, if that's the form of government that is decided.
The referendums are expensive,
It could be a bad question at the same November election cycle.
Yeah, good call on.
It doesn't have to be
It doesn't
done
have to be a
as a special,
special
it doesn't
election.
have to be done as a special election.
Okay.
How's the ballot, how's
All right.
it on the ballot?
There you go.
I don't know the answer to that.
You're the Jean. We always laugh, because he calls her the real Jean. Okay, I want to first say, I learned while we were here that Elaine Becker, her former mayor, has passed, and she was, it's weird because I always think of her as somebody who really served this town, like it didn't matter what her party was. She worked across the aisle, she did a lot of things that were very productive for our town. So I think there's some kind of, I don't know what, connection that she's there watching this and being very happy to hear it. Okay, so I'll start by saying I am the Republican chair in our town. I was elected a district leader and chair, so I do have a responsibility to uphold some of the ideals of that party and that capacity. But I do have my own personal beliefs, and that's what I'm speaking to today. It's my individual beliefs, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the committee. I have to first say that other people have said, but I'm gonna say it again. This is a huge amount of work, and I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank each one of you. I think it's an incredibly important thing that you're doing, and you are all taking it really seriously, and it shows, and I just wanna thank you. The first person that I ever heard about, a different form of government, nonpartisan, was Jane Moriarty. We spoke about this, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. We were just casually talking, and he brought it up, wanted to meet about it. And I learned a lot from him, and that was the first time that I started to think about all this. So it's been a while that I've been thinking about it, and I thank him for doing that. I would say that I had the experience of running in this town. I was elected to the Board of Education, and it was nonpartisan. At that time, I'd say the atmosphere in whatever it was, 2011, it was very different than it is today. But I was never asked once what my party was, and I was never asked once about my religion, my anything really. It was all about issues to do with school board. And I think based on the strength of my knowledge in certain areas, that's why I was elected. It had nothing to do with my political beliefs. I would say some of the other things I noticed back then was I felt that 9-person board was very productive, even though we had very strong differences of opinion on policy. We were able to talk them through. There was nobody telling us what to think or what not to think, or and I really have observed something very different in the last 5 years that I've been attending the township committee meetings. I don't feel that people can always speak their own views, think independently, talk independently, represent the town independently, and I think that is a big issue and has led to poor decisions. I would say that the level of rigor also in looking into problems that face our town was very different when I served on the Board of Education. There was a lot of rigor that went into the things that we discussed, the policy decisions that we made. I don't think that level has been achieved, although more recently I think it has, but I think over the time I've observed closely that has not happened. I think a lot of the reason is because the best people that we could attract to run don't run because they don't want to wear the scarlet letter R or the whatever letter D because of the kinds of things that Chris described. And I've witnessed it, and I think it's just terrible. I was on the street one day with Owen Olalabi when she ran, and a member of the Democratic Committee came literally rushing up to her and scolded her and said, "How can this Black woman run as a Republican?" I mean, it was just incredible. I couldn't believe somebody would in public do that or say that. So I think the sooner we get rid of that kind of stuff, the better for our town. The other thing I was gonna say is one recent event solidified my personal experience and thinking. We just did a bipartisan event that started with a conversation I had with Jorge Mastropietro. He happens to be my neighbor. He's a member of the Democratic Committee. He's someone who I really respect. I'm interested in architecture. I come from a family of architects, so I'm really into what he does. So we've talked about it a lot. And I heard a woman speak, I think it was Dr. I'm not thinking of her name. She spoke at the township committee meeting. She's also a Democratic committee member. She said, I really feel that we need a place to talk more deeply about issues that we don't have the time or the ability to do that at our township committee meeting. So I had the idea and I went to him, Jorge, I said, why don't we do an educational event on ICE? Because that seemed to be something that was repeatedly coming up. So Jorge was gracious enough to sponsor a meeting in his home. It was a group of people that I'm telling you would never have spoken to each other had we not done this. We had a really nice conversation. It was very, I would say intellectual. It was heartfelt. It was emotional. There was a lot of disagreement. But at the end of it, we came together and we all agreed we were going to put this thing together. We were going to work together, and we did. And it was really successful. And I think out of that came some renewed respect for people. And I have to say, I spent like 2 hours with my counterpart, Cheryl Damaris, and we had a really nice conversation. And like the last 10 minutes was about politics. And it again brings these kinds of things bring people together. And I think it's really reflective of our actual community, what we really are all like, that we do want to talk to each other. We don't want to feel disrespected. We don't want to have battles and call each other names because of an election or pick at people's past history or their personal, beliefs in certain ways. I think we do want to solve problems in our towns. I strongly, I feel that that's something that you guys should consider. I think you have. I think you've talked to enough people that you feel it. The fact that we had 67% of people vote in favor of forming what you're doing here speaks, I think, pretty loudly. So, and that's what I've heard. I think that a lot of us have heard from our efforts in what we do in our volunteer work. So the one thing I just highlight, last thing, I'm sorry to go on for so long, but I think it was the mayor of Verona that said, you can have any form of government, you can have partisan, nonpartisan. It's the quality of the people that serve that really make a difference. And that just came to me so strongly. I'm like, that's exactly what I really believe.
Right.
So good luck.
Gene, that
Thank you
was,
for your efforts.
I just verified with Dr. Khan, the mayor of Verona, once a quarter, they have a meeting like this, with the township committee, and
Like an open.
Forum like this, and everyone can say what they feel and everything. So you're 100% correct in that. I thank you for that.
Another business administrator said that he does that on the level of the municipal folks, so has like sort of a family dinner. So I think just in general, you bring people together around food and beverages, and I think you're not as heated. I think when you're sitting in a room like this, you might get more heated, but I think if the rules of engagement are preset in advance and you kind of walk into the room and agree that that's what you're doing, perhaps that discourse, and when you're in somebody's home, there's more civility potentially.
But on that point though, Joanna, you make a good one about civility. I think it's important to say that in the form of not partisan government, when one side dominates for a really long time, I think it engenders a lot of anger and people's voices that don't feel they've been heard. So things get to be more shrill and uncivil because they're not being heard. And I think that has happened under both parties that have dominated, that people felt unheard. So to get heard, they had to up the level of engagement, and sometimes it's not pleasant. But I think it's a sign that people don't feel heard.
Well, to that point, what we've heard also is we don't actually in Milburn, we haven't had a true primary system in Milburn.
I could say that.
I mean,
Oh, okay, now I get it.
meaning in the sense that even if you're affiliated with a party, you don't generally choose who's running for township committee. The party itself chooses. And even where there have been primaries over the last 10 years, the party backed a candidate. And so then it became an independent essentially running in a party. And so people have felt that, even at least nationally, in theory, you have the ability to choose your candidate who's running an election because you have a primary. In local governments, we've heard that sort of frustration told to us that.
Well, the concern, to your point, you don't know who's, the party's backing, but, and to our current mayor's point, you had to switch parties. the comment was made by folks who don't want to switch from one to the other, is that there's the wolf in sheep's clothing mentality. You don't actually know who you're getting, right? Well, but you already had to do that, right? You had to switch parties, so nobody knew what they were getting. So you had to kind of explain what you were about. And I have my cousin's husband in little town of South River, where my grandmother, emigrated to in the 1960s. And, now he is a young Egyptian man who became the mayor, and he switched parties in the middle because he was accused by one party. He's also a volunteer firefighter. So when they had the big floods there and the river overflowed, and their current mayor, who is the opposite party, he rescued him from his home in a little boat situation, brought him to his home, where my cousin and he put them up and their family. And the party came after him and said, how could you do that? That's an opposite. Because, well, that's my neighbor who was flooded, and I was a fireman. I had my fireman hat. And so I brought him to my house. And that was the first time he called me. He's like, Joanna, I don't even know what to do. I don't think I can be part of this party. And I was like, wow, that's a conundrum, because I really hadn't really, I was in this phase of life about 20 years ago. Couldn't believe it. So it's just, I think if everyone kind of puts their hats off, whether we have partisan or non-partisan,
Or at least
it
with
almost
the
doesn't
fire
matter. But I think the bottom line is, whatever the choice is, whatever we decide on the township behalf, whether it's partisan or non-partisan, I do think that the, civility hat has to go back on for everybody, and take the heat off. Because if the form of government is really, I think to Chinook's point, the form of government is probably the most important thing we need to consider. And then the second consideration, there could be a do-over. And if it's not this big referendum, that you're gonna pay money for, you do it in election year, let's consider the government first. And I think for us too, let's first consider the options that are real, and then let's go to the other part. I know the majority of the conversation was spent on the partisan, non-partisan. We hear you loud and clear. I'm a, bleeding heart liberal Democrat. I'm very transparent about it. I think all of us have our positions, what we agree with each other on. Not from a party hat, but just from a neighborhood hat, and the neighborhoods we come from and the things we do. So I think we just keep that in mind. Government first, consider part two, and see how we can align, as we're all deciding to.
Well, thank you.
Shut them up.
I now close the public comment period. Are there any comments from the commission regarding any comments made by the public, which we already had this interaction? So,
Is there anyone else?
Was there anybody else who felt unheard?
I closed the meeting.
You didn't ask me.
Does anyone else want to speak? Anyone else?
I just
I just want to thank you for having this forum. And I want to circle back how we began with Chris said. We look for the best interest of the whole community. And when you're looking at this, look at 3 factors that Judge Rakoff looked at, like factors where you're going to have political corruption, local political corruption. 1, lack of independent investigative reporting. The second factor was single party rule. And third one is the quality of people you attract. And I think that's what a lot of people have been focusing on when you have the elections. How can we get the best qualified people to serve on the local committee? Again, thank you for posting that.
Thank you.
I was gonna say, we thank you guys for coming out, because, we do care very passionately about doing a good job here. And without your input, we can't do a good job. So we appreciate you guys coming out.
And I want to apologize for my behavior.
Thank you.
Now you can have sourdough. And you can even take some home.
All right.
Now I'm gonna close the meeting.
Motion to close.
What?
Motion to close.
Motion to close.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Folks, get some food.
Yeah, please.